On the 8th of July 1966, inside of Leipzig Prison, a former doctor who worked inside of a concentration camp walked inside of an execution chamber and he was confronted by the guillotine. The guillotine execution device emerged throughout the French Revolution, but it was used in many different lands, and during the Second World War, it was used inside of Germany to condemn those who went against the Nazis and Hitler. But Horst Fischer was a man whose crimes were huge, and he was responsible for the estimated deaths of around 70,000 people. However, it was 20 years after the end of the conflict that he was brought to trial for his actions. But what did he do which was so horrific during the Second World War? Join us today as we look at the execution of the guillotined SS Doctor of Auschwitz Birkenau. And as always, to support our channel, please make sure to subscribe. Horst Fischer was born in December 1912 inside of Dresden, and he was an orphan as a young boy and was brought up by other relatives inside of the city and also in Berlin. Little is known about his early life, but he then attended a medical school at the University of Berlin and gained a medical degree in 1937. But in the years before this, he had joined the Nazi Party and also the SS, and following receiving his degree, he then in 1939, at the start of the Second World War, worked as a doctor for the SS. In May 1940, Fischer became an Untersturmführer, and he served as a member of the armed forces of the SS, or the Waffen-SS. He saw action at the start of Operation Barbarossa with the invasion of the Soviet Union, but he did then contract tuberculosis, and he spent time recovering before he was then taken from the front lines. Because of his work as a doctor, Fischer was then offered employment inside of the concentration camps, and he was promoted to an Obersturmführer. But he was then sent to go and work at Auschwitz-Birkenau in November 1942, and this was the main extermination element of the deadliest concentration camp. He was one of a number of other doctors, but he served also as the main doctor in the infirmary of the Monowitz IG Farben factory at the camp too. But when he was at Auschwitz, Horst Fischer was involved in the selection processes. During the selections, he would patrol the yards where the trains came in, and then, when prisoners disembarked, he selected inmates to go to their executions and deaths inside of the gas chambers. He also performed selections inside of roll call yards, inside of the prison hospitals, and also in the barracks. He claimed during this time at Auschwitz that we have gone so far that we can no longer go back, knowing how he had been responsible for the deaths of so many people. Horst Fischer, once selections had been done, then supervised the gas chambers and the gassing of the inmates, and he also ordered that torture and beatings should be used upon prisoners, and at least 71 times he ordered prisoners to be flogged for different infringements of the camp's rules. It has also been claimed that during his time in Auschwitz that he was responsible for the deaths of around 70,000 people. He was then promoted to the rank of Hauptsturmführer inside the SS, meaning he was one of the most senior ranking doctors and medical staff within the paramilitary wing, and specifically within Auschwitz. At the end of the Second World War, there was a huge hunt for members of the concentration camp staff who had participated in selections and executions of people. There were reprisals sought for those guards who committed horrific crimes, but Horst Fischer tried to escape his past, and he managed to establish a middle-class life working as a country doctor, and he lived with his wife and 4 children. He seemingly slipped through the fingers of the Allies, and he took great steps to hide from his actions in the war, knowing he would probably be executed if he was captured. Horst Fischer also managed to go into schools and give vaccinations, but he kept his crimes a secret, but thought that in the decades after the war they would never be tried for them, as too much time had passed since the war. However, in 1959, an official in West Germany was alerted to the crimes of Horst Fischer. Then an arrest warrant was released for his seizure. However, Fischer could not be found. But he had crossed to West Germany, and he spoke about his experiences within East Germany. And because of this, the Stasi were in April 1964 told of his crimes, and data was requested for him, with West German officials passing information to the Stasi. On the 11th of June 1965, the Stasi located Horst Fischer, the evil doctor of Auschwitz, and they lied to him, saying that they thought he had been involved in a car accident, and it was only until later that Fischer was told why he was being held inside of Hohenschönhausen prison. and over 7 months he was questioned significantly about his crimes and what he had done inside of Auschwitz. He was then brought to trial, and this began on the 10th of March 1966, and much evidence was heard in the court about Fischer's actions inside of Auschwitz and the work he had done, and also what he had done within the SS. The case was heard by the Supreme Court of the German Democratic Republic, and the prosecution used Fischer's work against him, and used sketches of Auschwitz to get evidence across. Horst Fischer's personal records were also found and used against him, and the indictment charged him with having conducted selections inside of the prison infirmaries in the main camp and the subcamps, and he was also charged with the supervision of SS disinfection details, which was responsible for discharging the Zyklon B poisonous gas into the gas chambers in Auschwitz-Birkenau, which were disguised as a sauna. But he was then accused of allowing the mistreatment of prisoners and having overseen beatings and torture, but he was also charged with asking and requesting for Zyklon B for the killing process. But the main charge that Horst Fischer was accused of was the selections of as many as 70,000 people inside of Auschwitz-Birkenau, which led to their extermination in the gas chambers. What was strange though is that Horst Fischer seemed to believe that if he cooperated with the proceedings and gave the judges what he thought they wanted, then he believed he would escape the death sentence and would instead get a period of imprisonment. At the time, many concentration camp guards and senior Nazis who had been imprisoned had their sentences reduced and they were then released. Fischer claimed that he was involved in the murders and the Holocaust and that any actions were pre-planned. He also claimed that the prisoners were exploited for slave labour, and when they could not work anymore as they were too ill, exhausted or weak, then they were sent to the gas chambers. Despite admitting all of this, he did not get what he believed would come, and he was actually sentenced to death, and it was stated that he should for his crimes be executed. There were appeals for clemency, but the chairman of the State Council refused these, and he would then be executed by the guillotine. The guillotine was used inside of Germany, and it was known as a Fallbeil, and was mostly a metal structure, and the executioners who used this could take someone's head cleanly off in a matter of seconds. It was known that within 10 seconds of someone entering the execution chamber in German prisons, then a head could be taken clean off. But on the 8th of July 1966, Horst Fischer was taken into the execution chamber of Leipzig Prison, where he had been sat on death row for a period. He was one of the last people to be executed on the Fallbeil in East Germany, but he was then handed over to the executioner as he entered the chamber. Quickly the assistants secured him to a board, which was then tilted under the Fallbeil, and he was then slid under the blade and into place. Final checks were quickly made before the executioner released the blade, and swiftly the blade fell, doing its job, taking the head of Horst Fischer cleanly off, the evil doctor of Auschwitz. Following his execution, the remains of the former doctor were cremated, and he was then buried in an unmarked grave. However, what shocked many was that this man, following the war, was allowed to practice medicine seemingly unchallenged for decades, under the noses of the Allies, who wanted to bring him to trial. The fact he would have so many patients and would carry out treatment upon children was harrowing, as he was someone who in his time had overseen such horror and slaughter inside of Auschwitz. His work sent a chill down the spine of the prosecutors, and he brazenly admitted what he had done, and Horst Fischer thought he would escape any form of punishment, but he thought incorrectly, and instead went to the guillotine. Thanks for watching. To support our channel, please make sure to subscribe, and once again, thank you so much for watching.